So in the agenda, it says I'm talking on driving automation in government organizations. That's kind of what I'm talking about. So I just put a shorter title here. All right. Okay. So I am going the wrong direction. I'm Jody Dorchester. I'm a senior partner with Ronin Software. We're a consulting firm. I'm up in Canada. We do a lot of government stuff, but we do a lot of other stuff as well. I've been a consultant for 20 years. That's been my life's blood. That's what I do. I've done all the roles, and I've worked in all the sectors. I'm a certified mixed martial arts judge for fighting. I've judged hundreds of fights, and 2 of them in the UFC. I'm a certified irrigation technician. So if you got trouble with that, more on the golf course side than personal, but give me a call. I just got my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt this year, so I had to put that up there. And I'm a losing poker player. It's called negative EV. So if you're going to have a game, invite me because I'm a good guy to have. All right. So currently, I'm a technical team lead in a government organization. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the team and where we are, and then how that influenced our journey in automation. So as opposed to probably a lot of the people here, we're on the operations side, right? We're not on the developer side. So we have 3 deployment analysts and 3 DBAs on the team. Our roles, what we do is we are the caretakers of UAT and prod. We configure the servers and deploy the applications in UAT and prod. We're asked to do standards and compliance reviews, and then we do incident response, and we're on call. So developers, the teams have no rights in those UAT and prod environments. Where we would like to go, and when I talk to management and try to tell them what we're doing now and where we're going, is very similar to the concept of software reliability engineering, SRE, great book out there by Google. That's the direction that we're talking about going. So in Agile, there's this idea of embedding operations inside the Agile team. We've got way too many teams to do that. We have so we end up with these dedicated engineers that are doing this very close to the role that Google defines in their SRE. So why did we end up doing automation? We already had a team, we're doing deployments and that sort of stuff, but we had increased pressure to do more with less. So we're constantly getting new applications and new projects coming on stream, but they're getting funded from the project. We don't get any of that funding, but we have to respond to the idea that, oh yeah, there's this new project coming along and they're going to be doing all this additional deployments. Modern deployment method or development methodologies such as Agile. I have a slightly different take on the idea of what DevOps is and how it's defined. I see DevOps as an operational response to the pressures put on by Agile. So Agile is, hey, I am going to release at a higher cadence. I want to do daily builds. I want to do this sort of thing. To do that, right, to be able to do that in a large organization, you have to automate. You have to respond to those pressures, or you're going to end up being the barrier between the team being able to meet the cadence or not. Hey, we would be able to release daily, but operations can't do it. They're just not able to respond to what we want. In general, our management wants to do DevOps. So this was said to us, hey, you guys got to do this thing. Well, how are you going to do it? And we're like, okay, we're going to do it via automation. Automation is going to be our primary way of responding to these goals and these pressures. So what's different about us than what would be in a different organization, different from maybe Aaron's organization or a smaller organization? we're engaging over 30 different development teams. These are unique teams that have their own project management, their own solution architect, maybe their own company and contracted directly to do that application. So the amount of influence that we have on the inside that team is limited. They are largely external contractors, sometimes under an AMS contract that spans years, and sometimes a fixed price contract that is just to do that application. They've already got their budget set. We can't affect their budget. A lot of the applications are always running. I mean, very similar to the WebMD idea. They're just there, right? They're going to continue to be there for 10 years. They've been there for 10 years. They're always in flight. Strict separation of duty. So we're talking about enterprise, where, as I said before, UAT and prod is by the deployment team. The devs don't get that access. That's mandated. They are not allowed to get there. We go through a yearly IT audit. This is includes auditor sitting down and going, oh, this is a work item. Show me the build that it was built under. Show me when it went to UAT. Show me who tested it and how they tested and when they approved it. Show me when it was supposed to go to prod. Prove that it went to prod. So we have to go through this process. We had to do it in the manual days. We have to do it in the automated days. The development teams don't have to engage us until UAT. So they may choose to have 3 or 4 environments before UAT, but they don't have to talk to us. They can do whatever they want, and then they throw it over the fence in UAT. That's how it's been historically. When we started the automation, we got approval to go ahead and try it out, but we didn't get management saying, everybody's got to do automation. Talk to these guys, thou shalt. We were going to automate front to back. This was within the little place where we had influence. We were able to do automation, but we couldn't mandate to anybody, you have to do it. So what was good about our structure? How did it make it easier for us to automate? So all the software teams were already talking to us. They were already engaging us because they had to engage us to get to UAT and prod. So it wasn't like we had to introduce a new communication structure for them to talk to us. They already were. We were already tasked with doing standards. So teams were already used to coming to us and saying, hey, here's our app, and us going, yeah, no, you're not putting that in UAT, that's not going to prod, you've got to fix this before we're going to go. So the idea of us providing feedback and having some influence into their process was already there. So from a standards perspective, this is a combination of the standards that we had at the time and actually what we implemented to make automation easier. So we're .NET Microsoft Shop across the board. That's one thing that we have going for us. All those 30 teams are doing .NET development. We changed everybody over to Xcopy deploys. So we're not taking MSIs, we're not allowing install packages, you give us the artifact. We have to have approvals. UAT has to have an approval before it moves to prod. That has to be a business user. We already had naming standards for our environments and for a bunch of the artifacts within there, our databases, other things like that, that allowed us to do some of the standards checking and some of the other stuff that we did to make the auditor happy. So because we already had stated standards, it allowed us to build on top of that and continue on with our automation journey. That included standard namings of IDs and standard namings of IIS artifacts within the web config and the web config itself. We also already had the idea of documentation that was going to come to us when people did a deploy. So we changed that into similar documentation, but a one-time document that talked about how we were going to implement the automation for them. And then we already had the idea of separation of duties, but under the new regime, the separation was the scripting, the processes that were being done to do the deployment were owned by the deployment team. So the application team would say, here's the sort of thing that we want. We need these things copied here. We want this done. We want these additional settings or whatever they wanted. We would take that, automate it, create the script, and then the team is then able to run that script through Buildmaster and continue on with the deployment. When we're talking to the auditor accepts that as a separation of duties. As long as that developer isn't the guy who created the script and is also the person running the script, they're okay. So because we author the script, but they are able to promote the deployment, it satisfies their requirement for a separation of duties. But there's always exceptions. So just some high level, like how do we get this going? How do we gain momentum? What do we do within our organization to get things going? So we actually started with senior management, architects, and project managers going, hey, we got this cool thing. You might want to use it, you might not, but here it is. It's really neat, like getting it into their mindset. A little bit of a sales job, but not super. Just say, hey, this will make your project go smoother. You might get some benefits down the road. Let us know if you're interested. We're highlighting the benefits of automation, the repeatability, the possibility of increased cadence was what we talked to these guys about. Again, we're in the government organization, there's more emphasis on reduced risk, not necessarily on saving money. So if you can say to them, oh, we do this the same all the time, it's going to reduce your risk, they'll hear that. If you say, oh, well, we do this and it's going to save you tons of money, we're going to be able to save everybody money. Well, okay, it's not my money, right? Well, it is my money because it's the government, but there's less emphasis on it. But we still made it optional. So when I talked to Mike about what we did, he goes, what? It's optional? So like no one did it. I go, no, people still did it. He goes, I don't think this would work in the US. This may be a Canadian specific model. But that's how we initially engaged these guys. After that, we identified good teams. So we're talking about people who are probably doing a smaller app, who are probably doing new development versus legacy maintenance, and who are probably using newer technologies. And those guys we would engage directly. So we would say, okay, hey, you're new, we're doing this new thing, we want you to use automation as your first step. So other ideas of good candidates, and we've turned down teams who've wanted to automate but weren't good candidates. It's, if you're using an MSI installer and no one understands it, and it's a complex app and there are no developers, but somebody knows how to just tweak this little bit and push the button to create the MSI and here you go. We may say to them, no thanks, we'll use the manual process for you. We're not going to spend the time and effort to automate that. So if they came into the automation program, UAT and prod were going to be automated. Had to be automated. They could do earlier, but to be part of us, you got to do UAT and then to prod. Just like with our standards, the approvals had to be there. It had to be at least before you went into prod. On the UAT step, there had to be approvals after the UAT was tested to go into prod. Approvals had to be the business. This is just specific to us. So we're not having a technical team lead or a project manager doing the approvals. It is the business. This is part of our audit requirements. That person, when the auditor looks them up in the Active Directory, has to be a business person who said, yeah, go ahead. We did stuff like approvals and the build managers within each project is all governed in AD. It's all AD integrated. We're using groups for everything. We're not putting individuals in there because we want to be hands-off. We want to touch Buildmaster as little as possible. So if somebody wants to change their approvals, they go through the Active Directory process to change that group. If somebody wants to add additional team members, they go through the Active Directory process. We don't want to be managing that stuff. We don't have time. We've got too many apps and too few people to be in there mucking around with individual rights where possible. So like we were saying, Xcopy deploy, we're talking about file drops of artifacts. So again, we're engaging at UAT at a minimum. So there may be a bunch of environments before us that we don't have visibility of. But at a minimum, they're going to file drop their stuff at their end of their build, and then Buildmaster's going to pick it up from there. We do have TFS integration on some. We do have TeamCity, a bunch of other source control providers. But again, the minimum requirement is we don't care. We don't care how you build it. Just give us the artifacts, and we'll automate from there. So no more MSIs. And then I've got to talk this afternoon about DaveBot. So there is a compliance scanner that we use, that we built, that's built into Buildmaster, that is part of the build step. So the build step has to pass our compliance scan for it to even create the artifact. And so that's what DaveBot is, and I go into details this afternoon if you're interested. So what did the first wave look like? What did we get going here? So mainly to start with, we're talking about AMS, application maintenance and support pipelines, as opposed to project pipelines. So we're SQL Server, and although Buildmaster does have built-in ability to use the SQL, their embedded SQL script management process, we didn't use that. We just had them give us the SQL scripts, just like they would now. We package it as a separate artifact, and we just use SQL command to run those scripts in order as part of their release process. This was the first wave and how we did that stuff there. First wave, people had outage windows, had your release Fridays or whatever else. That was something they were used to. We did not get rid of those in the first wave. We said, yeah, that sounds good to us. If you're normally telling your business you're down for 4 hours on Friday afternoon, let's leave that in place. This was partially this risk thing, right? We were pretty sure we were going to be able to get rid of a lot of those or shorten those windows or whatever, but on the first wave, that was not what we wanted to do. We wanted success after success to build this momentum within the organization. So we said, leave your outage windows. And what happens is they came back to us and said, yeah, we don't need those anymore. Can we shorten it? But we're not telling them. The business, the teams are going, yeah, let's keep this going. So we also made us on call during those deployments in this first wave, right? So we would say, listen, when you're going to UAT or prod, drop us a note, let us know. We don't want to be involved, we don't have to approve it, we don't have to be anything like that, but we want to know when you're doing it so that if production goes down after a deploy, we're not surprised. We've got guys ready to help action it. So that went great. Teams are going, things are going along, and we're starting to get more and more adopters, partially because we had these successes and the people involved saw that and started talking to their peers. So that initial sales job, we got into the senior management, the PMs, and they became aware of what we were doing. And now the architects and the developers are going, hey, have you tried this? Hey, this is really helping us out. This is really making it easier for us. So in that first wave, because we were trying to get people on board, we weren't super strict about how we did stuff. We worked with the teams, and we had what we call like unique or one-off plans and pipelines to allow them to do what they needed to do. By the time we went into the second wave, we templated everything. So everything that we had was based on a template, and we had, I would say probably 85 to 90% where we didn't have to do anything inside Buildmaster to add additional steps. We had templates set up, and all we had to do was provide variables to those templates, and we could get teams automating their first environment in an hour after they would engage us. We push left, they push left. So push left is prod is here. We said you had to do UAT. Now, what about your system test? Don't you have something over here? Is there a dev? There's an integration test over here. So we started talking to them about it, but they did too. So as soon as they saw that UAT and prod, which is the hard environments, were working so well, they came to us and go, we want the whole thing. We have some applications that have 26 environments with probably 6 or 7 pipelines. So they had giant whiteboards with stickies, with version numbers, and they had guys dedicated to managing what was in what environment and how the release went. And as soon as they saw that this was going to be able to help them, they're begging us to automate their stuff. We ended up with hotfix and project pipeline. So hotfix being ways to bypass the normal pipelines. So instead of maybe system test, integration, UAT, prod, they have a hotfix environment for the test that could go straight to prod. So more pipelines and different ways of doing it that still would allow us to do the compliance, but it would allow them to do a quick release to respond to a quick thing that was happening in production without messing with all the other stuff that they had in flight. And then starting to work with project development teams as opposed to AMS teams. So we started getting rid of our outage windows. We started doing rolling installs with 0 downtime. So tweaking our pipelines, we already had a standard where every web application was on multiple servers behind a load balancer, but they were still doing these big outage windows because everything was manual. So you had people doing stuff and you couldn't guarantee that one server was always available. So we started educating the teams on the idea of breaking changes in the database, reducing those, and then having basic smoke tests to make sure one server was up before we started to deploy on the second server. So we had teams that had 4-hour outage windows, that those outage windows just went away. And their business is like, how did you do this? This is awesome. But it was just a matter of incrementally getting better and better at those pipelines and working with the teams to make it so that things weren't affected. After hours and scheduled deploy. So before this, almost all of the deploys that we did were during working hours because we needed to have the staff on hand to deal with things when the deployment went bad. And there had to be somebody there to do the deploy. So now teams are comfortable to schedule their deployments to happen at midnight or 1. That there just isn't a failure in the deploy process. Everything's getting caught and they schedule it, we don't even know. Integration into smoke tests, part of the same sort of thing, checking the deploy after it goes up to make sure things are up and running. For SQL Server, we went from the simple scripts now to using DAC paths for SQL deploy. What that gives us is, my favorite word, idempotence, the ability to rerun that deploy. So if the DAC path's done right and your deploys run right, the backout plan is run the previous build. The previous build was good, right? Yeah, we just ran the current build and it broke UAT. How do we get it back? I'm like, you don't have to talk to us. Rerun the previous build. If you're using DAC paths for your SQL, it's going to go back one because we have DAC path as an artifact within there, and we're doing XCopy for the artifact, so you just copy it over. So the rollback isn't in effect. We're not involved in the rollback either. They're just doing it by re-releasing the previous install into that environment. And we got all this. Probably the middle one was the hardest. SQL Server reporting services, integration services, Microsoft Dynamics, and Active Batch. So away from, hey, we're just doing this web thing, we're not going to touch anything else, now we broaden it out. So we're doing reporting and integration services, and now we're doing full releases of the Dynamics applications, as well as Active Batch schedulers and doing the stuff for that. So what do we get? Although our initial focus was to automate UAT, the teams were the ones who came back to us and asked us to do their early environments. So this model kind of turns on the head what most people see for CI/CD. They see individual teams going, oh, we got this build automation, now we want to push here, and now we want to push there, and some teams are good at it, and some teams aren't good at it. And so if it's a team that's not good, you end up, like what Aaron's outfit did, where they need to build a team to help the teams do builds, right? They have a build team that helps guys figure out TFS build and how do I do like that sort of stuff. We avoided that by basically loosely coupling between our deployment model and our build model. So teams are still able and doing the build automation and doing their automated testing and doing all that sort of stuff. But all we need out of that is an artifact. We need an artifact out of that, we package it, then we do the deployments for them. So we can have disparate teams with different skill sets, and we can still do the automation for them. This was like another kind of unexpected was that the business started pushing for automation as much as the teams did. They saw the benefit of not having as much downtime, of having less failed deploys. So they were putting the pressure on their teams, and then their teams were talking to us, and we didn't really expect that as a win. We're just like, okay, we're gonna automate, we're selfish, we're doing it for our reasons, but we end up with these other benefits that have nothing to do with why we did it, but the organization as a whole benefited from it. So once you take out those barriers to say, oh, well, we have to have release windows, or we're worried about outages or whatever else, even teams that aren't agile are moving from quarterly releases to monthly releases to weekly releases and not worrying about it. They don't have an agile structure within their team, but they can do waterfall quicker waterfall. So we get the benefits of an increased release cadence, and these teams can say, well, look at how agile we are. But they're not agile, but they're getting some of the benefits just via automation. As soon as we showed this to the auditor, the first audit that we had, they're like, oh, that's good. Have you talked to other people? Can you show this to other departments and other areas? This is great, right? Because basically for a release, there's one screen in Buildmaster, and that's all I did. I wasn't jumping from spreadsheets to work items to this to that. I was on one screen. He's like, when did this release start? I'm like, build. Who put it into dev? Click on it. Oh, this was deployed by this person. Who approved it in UAT? Oh, look, here it is. All in one screen. So the first one, their whole conversation with me was around the separation of duties. They saw the benefits instantly of being able to report on it, be able to track the changes. That was all there. The discussion was, okay, and how does this prevent a developer from, being silly and doing something that they shouldn't do? How are we making sure that business is approving every deployment? And so once they understood that, they became an advocate for us as well. And so when they talk to management, they're like, oh, and by the way, do more of this, and it will make your life easier. So we started actively doing this in June 2014, about. And like I said, we didn't make people do it. We worked with them. Currently, we have 269 applications in Buildmaster. We have 192 user accounts, so primarily we're talking about build managers and approvers. We have agents on 485 servers, and the average over the last 3 months was about 4,500 deploys. This is how it looks like over time. The colors are two different areas. I just used a standard report that I have. This graph will keep going. We still have automations that we need to do. There's still teams that are engaging us, and people are implementing Agile. So because of that, although the application count has gone up, it hasn't gone up as quickly as this because applications are doing Agile, which means more releases. I'd say about 10% of these are production releases. So we're talking about 3,600 non-prod releases and about 400 prod releases for the last couple months. Questions? Comments?
I've got one. So, actually I wrote a couple. So, how do you feel the reaction to, so you sort of talked about how you build automation standards in 2 waves. Wave number 1 was the very basics. Wave number 2 was a lot more of the advanced techniques. Now, had you had you started with wave 2, how do you think it would have increased the adoption or created intimidation? Because it looks like it's too much at once.
I mean, we felt that we had to have some early wins. And the more complex we made things, we were, again, risk, right? We're just trying to make sure that whatever we were doing and how we were implemented was going to succeed. So we would rather have a small success that wasn't, doing everything, as opposed to, picking one of the bigger teams and trying to do something that would impress a lot of people, but had more risk of not working. So we just started small, and that's probably the primary reason. So it is possible that if we were as good as we think we are, that we could have done the wave 2 level stuff right off the bat, but it was 100% managing risk. We just wanted to get a bunch of small wins going.
Do you have any mobile apps in this setup?
No. Well, I mean, there definitely are adaptive design applications that are public facing that people would be hitting, HTML5 apps and other stuff like that.
Right.
But again, we're deploying to servers, not necessarily doing like desktop or mobile device deployments. But there definitely is like public facing that we can't control who gets to it, and that's some of the ones that have the outage windows and the very sensitive to downtimes because they can impact a large population. All right?
So, I see a lot of large organizations and sometimes, inside of our customers have a very similar setup in so much as the organization structure, they have, you said 30 teams, but they will have dozens of different disparate teams. Some of them do Java, some of them came from acquisitions. Obviously, there needs to be some sort of standardization, but one question that they ask to us, and which I wonder is, should each team get their own set of automation tools? So in this case, a single instance of Buildmaster, and then have that instance be owned and overseen by someone on your team?
I mean, you saw the colors on the graph. That's 2 instances of Buildmaster, right? So we actually have 2 different areas with 2 instances of Buildmaster. We're gonna merge them. we're probably going to merge them. It's additional management, right? And because stuff like Dave bought and the templates and the other stuff that we do, that's where a lot of the benefit are. So if we end up with 30 instances of Buildmaster, we end up with 30 places that we, now we need Buildmaster to deploy Buildmaster scripts and you know, the templates and that sort of stuff, because we've got this spread out thing. And again, it gets down to this separation of duty stuff. We need to be able to be confident when we're talking to the auditor that what we have, we've got control of. And so I could see, I understand, you know, the benefit that people would talk like that. And that's part of the reason, like, we're loosely coupled with Build, is that if a team is doing, you know, Java or something else, and they have a totally different build process, or they come in, you know, we end up with fixed price contracts where these guys are bringing in their tool set. They bid based on them using their tools in their way. We can't change that on them. They've got to be able to do that. And so we're able to come in later and say, okay, well, just throw your artifacts over the wall and we'll take care of it from there. And so they're able to be as flexible as they need to be without us getting in the way. But, you know, there's that benefit of that being loosely coupled, right? If we wanted to, so we have, although we're .NET, we have both TeamCity and TFS. And down the road, we're probably going to end up with people on Azure for their builds, right? Doesn't matter. We can still use the same process and implement the same way regardless of where these people are coming from. And that's a huge win for us, because then we don't have to make special cases for teams.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know we have some customers with dozens and hundreds of instances of our products, and from a, you know, I'm trying to balance the, sure, we can build, and we're working on it, sort of this meta management tool that manages and lets you share things, but it's more from an organizational, that I'm always trying to get that insight on, you know, how do you balance giving those teams? I think it made a lot of sense what you said, which is, how do you balance giving each of these individual teams autonomy but standardization?
Yeah.
That's that balance.
And again, right, like I totally understand an organization that would, you know, give that dev team their own Buildmaster instance, and you just go and you do what you need to do, because that team is responsible from writing code all the way to the prod server, and if it goes down, that team's responsible. And that's some of the concepts within DevOps, depending on who you talk to. You know, operations, that you as a DevOps team are responsible for the whole thing, but in our organization, that's not the reality. And it's interesting when you talk to guys who are really in that space, they will reference the Google model in SRE, where they're like, Google does not embed SRE engineers on every team. Every team engages SRE before they go to prod, and every team is using automation that's built by the SRE team, but they're not embedded operators on the team. So.
But it is also true that if the application fails in production or degrades in production over time, the SRE team hands it back to the engineer.
Yeah, oh, 100%, right? Like, and
so
that,
they sort of manage.
yeah, and that's the thing, is that there is this collaboration idea, and that's part of the stuff that we're struggling with, right? Where we're focused on, if you grab the book and you're looking, I love the idea, they use the term toil. And toil is a person doing a task that you can automate. That's it. And they say our SREs should be less than 50% toil. They should be spending 50% or more of their time automating. That's all they should be doing. And if they're doing more than that, then we got to figure out what they're working on and figure it out. So that's where we're focused. But when you get to true operations and you start talking about, you know, your service levels and and all that, I mean, that's a whole nother kind of topic in the operations space, and I get you, yeah, for sure. Right? Okay. Oh. We have one more down front here.
Yeah.
One more question.
So a lot of it was, how do you get, do you provide the different development teams visibility into the end-to-end of the applications that they've built? Or are they still sort of, you mentioned drop folder.
Yeah.
Are they just sort of, is the drop folder the end of their journey? Or do they now see it being pulled up into Buildmaster? They see it going through the environments?
So we create the plans, the modules, the pipelines, and then we're done. So day to day, those 4,000 releases, none of our team's involved in those. Every individual team has a build manager, and that build manager is the guy who's saying, yeah, I put a new version in my drop folders, go get it. Okay, I'm ready, put it to UAT, go get the approvals that are needed and everything. So that's our separation. So we're reducing the toil of us being the button pushers. Somebody's still pushing the button, we're making the team push the button. And they can see their artifacts and everything. We're using almost the default build manager role in Buildmaster. That's what the teams have. So they see all their stuff, they can see all that, and then it falls, then visibility in UAT and prod falls back to our monitoring in the way that we do that. But, all right. I think that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.